the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Okay, so this week, you sent me some articles, and I gotta say, they're pretty interesting. It's all about this recent event in the House of Representatives, and on the surface, it just looks like, just another vote on a procedural matter. You know how they do things in the House.
Yeah.
But when you really look into it, this is about proxy voting for new parents, and it's causing a huge internal conflict among Republicans.
Absolutely.
It seems like, way more than just a little procedural hiccup, right?
Oh, yeah. This goes way deeper than just, the mechanics of voting.
Yeah.
It's really revealing some big cracks in the Republican Party, fundamental disagreements about what it means to serve in Congress. How do you balance family with the demands of the job?
Right.
And ultimately, I think this boils down to a question of priorities. What really matters to them right now?
Okay, so let's break this down for our listeners. The basic question here is, should House members be allowed to vote remotely, like right after they've had a baby? And this did not stay a quiet little debate behind closed doors. This thing blew up when 9 House Republicans decided to side with the Democrats on this procedural vote that the Democrats put forward. And this vote was just about whether a bill on proxy voting for new parents would even be considered.
Exactly.
Speaker Mike Johnson was not happy about this.
Not at all.
I mean, reportedly furious.
His reaction speaks volumes. It shows you there's a very traditional mindset at play here. The idea that being physically present for votes, that's like a core, non-negotiable duty of a representative.
Right.
So for him, these 9 Republicans voting with the Democrats, it wasn't just like, oh, we disagree on this policy. It was a total breach of party discipline on something super fundamental to the job.
And, somebody who's absolutely on board with that sentiment is Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Of course, yeah.
She has been so vocal against proxy voting. Like, in general, she just sees it as, making it less important to actually be there in person. Her comments have been pretty straightforward, pretty much saying if you can't be there to vote in person, then maybe you need to rethink being in Congress.
It's a pretty clear line in the sand. Greene's position, it really reflects this deeply held belief that physical presence equals commitment.
Right.
It's like this. Think about it historically.
Yeah.
The Republican Party has always emphasized this unwavering dedication to duty.
Yeah.
Almost like a sense of sacrifice.
Yeah.
She even compared it to soldiers being deployed.
Right.
Which, might be controversial to some, but it really highlights that idea that personal stuff has to come second to the responsibilities of the office.
Okay, so then on the other side of this, you have Representative Anna Paulina Luna.
Right.
And she is all about allowing proxy voting, especially for new parents. I mean, she feels so strongly about it that she actually resigned from the House Freedom Caucus.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big deal.
That's not a small move. That really shows you how important this is to her.
It really does.
Yeah.
Her decision to leave the Freedom Caucus shows that this isn't just about convenience for her. She sees it as a matter of fairness, making sure that being a parent doesn't prevent you from representing your constituents.
Right.
Her argument, it aligns with this more modern understanding of work-life balance and, the need for more inclusive political structures.
Right. And then, of course, we have to talk about the 9 Republicans who actually voted with the Democrats.
Yeah, the ones who really set this whole thing off.
Yeah. On that key procedural step, these were representatives Kevin Kiley, Tim Burchett, Jeff Van Drew, Greg Stube, Mike Lawler, Ryan McKenzie, Nick LaLota, and Max Miller.
It's their decision to break ranks that really got Speaker Johnson and Representative Greene so fired up.
So what do you make of those 9? What do you think was going on there?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because they essentially chose to prioritize having a debate about proxy voting for new parents.
Yeah.
Even though it meant going against their party on a procedural vote, it suggests that for them, this principle of supporting new parents, or maybe even a broader concern about how rigid the House rules are, that was more important than the pressure to just vote along party lines.
Yeah.
I think it hints at maybe a growing divide within the party on these kinds of issues.
So for me, our mission in this deep dive is to really get to the bottom of this whole clash within the Republican Party.
Absolutely.
We need to figure out Not just what happened, but why everyone is reacting so strongly. And what this could mean going forward, this seemingly small vote, it feels like it's actually hitting on some very fundamental beliefs and values.
Right. We have to look beyond just what's happening on the surface and think about the underlying values and priorities that are driving these reactions.
Yep.
What does this specific disagreement tell us about the state of the Republican Party as a whole?
Okay.
What are the different factions at play, and what do their stances on this issue reveal about their core ideologies?
Well, okay, so let's start with what happened right after this vote. Our sources say that Speaker Johnson was so unhappy with the outcome that he basically shut down all House floor action for the rest of the week. He straight up said that because this procedural hurdle had been cleared, they couldn't move forward with the legislative agenda they had planned. That's a pretty big move, wouldn't you say?
It's a huge move to actually shut down the House because of procedural vote that sends a very clear message.
Yeah.
It shows how frustrated the Speaker is.
Yeah.
And maybe even some concern about whether he can control his own caucus.
Right.
You could also see it as a tactic.
Yeah.
A way to emphasize that there are consequences for not following party lines, even in things that seem minor.
And he specifically said that votes on the SAVE Act, which is, supposed to be about election integrity,
Right.
and taking action against what he called rogue judges who are supposedly targeting President Trump's agenda, and also votes to repeal policies from the Biden administration, all of that got put on hold.
That's a lot of their legislative priorities that are now on the back burner just because of this one vote.
It is a pretty significant chunk.
By directly linking the vote on proxy voting to delaying these big policy goals, Speaker Johnson is really raising the stakes here. He's saying that the actions of those 9 Republicans are directly preventing the party from achieving its larger goals.
Right.
This kind of direct consequence, it could definitely cause more friction within the party.
Yeah.
And maybe even pressure those members to think twice before they vote against the party line again.
Now let's talk about how some of the key people involved are actually talking about this.
So?
Representative Luna, after the vote, she seemed really proud. She called it a historical day.
Yeah.
And she emphasized that the House had decided that parents deserve a voice in Washington. She also talked about the importance of having more women in these roles. It sounds like she saw this as a big win.
Her perspective is all about making the legislative process more accessible and representative.
Okay.
By focusing on parents, and especially women, she's tapping into this larger conversation about the challenges of balancing work and family,
Yeah.
and how those challenges can really disproportionately affect certain groups.
Right.
She's saying that allowing proxy voting for new parents is a step towards a more equitable and modern Congress.
But then you have Representative Greene, and as we've heard, she had a totally different take on this.
Right.
Very different. She basically said, being a member of Congress, it's a privilege and a really important job.
Yeah.
She even compared it to, soldiers who are deployed and have to miss those first moments with their kids.
Wow.
Suggesting that members of Congress need to put their duties above their personal life, and if they can't do that, maybe they should step down.
It's a very different view from Luna's.
Yeah, a pretty stark contrast.
Greene's argument, it comes from this very traditional idea of public service. Duty and sacrifice come before everything else.
Okay.
It emphasizes how much responsibility comes with holding office. And it suggests that those responsibilities, they have to come first. It's almost like a critique of people who might prioritize their personal needs over their duty.
And what's interesting is that, at least from what we've seen, Luna hasn't directly responded to Greene's criticisms publicly. However, she did speak on the House floor about Speaker Johnson's actions.
What did she say?
Well, she pointed out that the Republicans have had the majority for several months now, and they've had plenty of time to bring forward legislation on things like election integrity and those so-called rogue judges.
Interesting.
She seemed to be implying that tying her discharge petition on proxy voting to this rules package at the last minute, that was more of a political tactic than an actual legislative necessity. What do you think about that?
It sounds like there could be a rift developing between her and the speaker, or at least a difference in how they think strategically.
Yeah.
By pointing out how long the Republicans have had the majority, she's kind of questioning whether it's really that urgent to link her proposal to these other priorities that have been around for a while.
Right.
It almost sounds like she feels like her idea was being used as a political pawn.
Yeah.
Instead of being considered on its own merits.
Yeah.
And, that kind of internal maneuvering, it can lead to more distrust.
Yeah.
And make it even harder to find common ground.
Okay, so let's try to put all of this together. What are the key takeaways here? we have this issue of remote voting for new parents.
Right.
Which seems pretty specific, but it's really opened up this whole can of worms within the House Republicans. You have very strong opinions on both sides, a speaker who's trying to exert his authority, and a real impact on their legislative agenda. I mean, it feels like this is a tiny example of some much bigger tensions within the party.
I completely agree. If you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, this whole thing reveals a huge ideological divide within the Republican Party.
Okay.
It's not just about whether proxy voting is practical or not. It's about fundamental questions like, what role does family play in public life? What does it even mean to be a committed public servant?
Yeah.
And maybe even a generational clash in how people view these issues and how important they are.
Right.
This isn't just a disagreement about a policy. It's a clash of values.
And the fact that Speaker Johnson decided to stop all House floor action that has real consequences, it means those votes they were promising on all those big Republican priorities like election integrity, what they see as judicial overreach against Trump, and trying to undo Biden's policies, all of that is stalled.
That's all pros.
And that could have some real political ramifications in the short term.
It really could. This whole situation raises a big question about whether the Republican Party can actually govern effectively.
Yeah.
Can they get anything done when they have these huge disagreements internally, not just on big policy issues, but even on procedural matters that have become so symbolic? The fact that they can't even vote on things because of this infighting, it really shows how hard it's going to be to stay united as a party.
Yeah.
And actually make progress on their legislative goals.
It is really interesting to see how differently people are interpreting this whole thing.
Yeah.
Representative Luna, she sees this vote as a positive step, for parents and for having more women in Congress, which suggests a more modern and inclusive way of thinking about public service. But then Representative Greene has this more traditional and you could say more demanding view of what it means to serve, where you're expected to put your personal life aside and focus on your duties. It's like two totally different philosophies are clashing here.
What really stands out to me is how intensely people are reacting. This wasn't a close vote on a controversial bill or anything.
Right.
It was a procedural vote. And it's led to all this public anger, accusations of political games, and even the suspension of legislative business. It shows how deep these divisions run within the Republican caucus, and how even something that seems small can trigger a major conflict.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's clear that this whole thing that started with a seemingly minor vote has really brought to light some major internal tensions within the House Republicans. It sparked these fundamental debates about balancing your personal life with your public duty and what it really means to represent people in the 21st century. This is way bigger than just some Washington insider story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The immediate consequences are obvious. They can't get anything done in the House right now.
Right.
But the long-term implications, can they stay united as a party? Can they govern effectively with all this division going on? Those are the questions you need to think about. This one vote has really exposed some important underlying dynamics.
So considering how strongly people feel about this and the fact that it's basically brought the House to a standstill, what does this tell you about what's really going on within the Republican Party right now? What are their priorities? Are they even on the same page? And maybe even more importantly, how are these big disagreements going to affect their ability to get anything done moving forward? It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
It is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family.